Hi, welcome back to my class in statistics. In lesson 1, we said that statistics is a scientific discipline that is concerned with collection of data, organization and presentation of data, analysis of data, and interpretation of data. In the first lesson, we also grouped the data collection methods as quantitative data collection methods or qualitative data collection methods. We said that data collection methods answered the question of how much, while the qualitative data collection method answered the question of why. And some of the most commonly used quantitative data collection methods are interviews, observation, focus group, oral histories, and the use of questionnaires and surveys. We also said that the quantitative data collection methods are frequently used in quantitative research approaches, and we identified 4 of the common quantitative research designs, and these are descriptive research design, the correlational research design, the experimental research design, and the quasi-experimental research design. The descriptive research, in descriptive research, the researcher collects and presents information about the current status of the variable being investigated. And to summarize and present the results of the study, the researcher uses graphs and tables. In correlational research, the researcher collects data to establish relationships between variables. The experimental research design and the quasi-experimental research both use the scientific method, but many researchers prefer the experimental research design because it produces results with internal and external validity, while the quasi-experimental research design has a problem with internal validity because it does not employ random sampling and it does not randomly assign subjects to either the treatment group or the control group. Among the qualitative data collection methods that we have taken last time are ethnography, grounded jury, and phenomenology. And we said that in ethnography, the researcher tries to understand how people live their lives. And the researcher achieves this by observation to find the reasons or the motivation behind their actions, their decisions, and their desires or aspirations. In grounded theory, the sociological researchers are interested in grounding their research or study in reality rather than in assumptions. And some of the data collection methods used by researchers in using grounded theory approach to their research include participant observation, interviews, and the use of documents and artifacts. And phenomenology, in phenomenology, the researcher is interested in the commonality of the lived experience within a specific group. And through this approach or to qualitative research, the researcher may generalize or construct meaning about the event or experience of a certain group of people to achieve a more profound understanding of a phenomenon. Today we will take up 2 types of data: the quantitative data and the qualitative data. Quantitative data are those data that can either be can either be measured or counted. And these examples of these quantitative data are height, weight, age, income, area, perimeter, and volumes. There are two types of quantitative data. These are the continuous data and the discrete data. Discrete data are quantitative data that can be counted, such as the number of fatalities in car accidents, vehicular accidents, or the number of fatalities in the recent pandemic in our country due to COVID-19, or the number of children in families. The other type is the continuous data. These are quantitative data that are obtained by measurement. So there is a device for obtaining this quantitative data. The second type of data is the qualitative data. These are data that pertain to properties, traits, attributes, or characteristics of individuals. And these data cannot be measured or quantified, but they can be observed by the researcher. Examples of these are color, height, taste, odor, and personal qualities of a person or individual. Again, the two types of data are quantitative data and qualitative data. And the quantitative data are those data that can be measured or counted. Those data that can be measured or obtained by measurement are known as the continuous data, while those quantitative data that can be obtained by counting are known as discrete data. The qualitative data are the data that pertain to properties, traits, characteristics, or attributes. And this data cannot be either be measured or counted, but they can be observed. An example would be the qualities of a person or height when you classify height as tall or medium size or small. Now we take the two branches of statistics. The statistical tools in these two branches of statistics are used for the analysis of data. And one set of tools from one branch of statistics cannot fully provide a complete picture of the population or sample of data. So the tools from both of these two branches of statistics can provide a powerful tool for analyzing data and for making description and inferences about a population. The first branch of statistics is the descriptive statistics. This branch of statistics uses data to provide numerical descriptions, to provide description of the population or sample, either through the use of numerical calculations or the use of graphs and tables. While the second branch of statistics, known as Inferential Statistics, it is a branch of statistics that is concerned with making an inference about a population on the basis of the data collected from a sample that is chosen randomly from the population. An inference means an inference can be a generalization, a prediction, a forecast, a tentative solution, or a tentative conclusion. And Population is refers to the totality of all entities under consideration. For example, you are making a study of the study habits of the students from the University of the Philippines. Then your population will consist of all students from the different branches of the University of the Philippines. This will be your population, the set of all students from the University of the Philippines from the different branches of the Philippines. If you want to make a study of the study habits of the students of the University of the Philippines, your population denoted by P will consist of all students from the different branches of the University of the Philippines. But in most researches, it is impossible to conduct a study that involves the entire population because the size, the number of members in the population can be too large to be managed well by the researcher. So what the researcher does is to select a sample. The researcher selects a sample from the population, and the researcher collects data from this sample. So a sample is a part or a portion of the population that is selected by the use of a sampling technique. The sample should be an excellent representative of the population, so that the conclusion or generalization that will be drawn from the results obtained from a sample can apply to the entire population. That is why there are sampling techniques or sampling methods for selecting a sample from the population. And these sampling techniques include random sampling, systematic sampling, cluster sampling, stratified sampling, and convenience sampling, and purposive sampling. These are only some of the most commonly used sampling techniques. And we will take them up one by one now. Again, the two branches of statistics that we will use for analysis of data are descriptive statistics and inferential statistics. Descriptive statistics uses data to provide descriptions of a population or sample either through numerical calculations or the use of graphs and tables. While inferential statistics is concerned with making an inference about a population on the basis of the data collected from a sample that is selected from the population using one of the sampling techniques. And we said that the population consists of all entities under consideration. And the example we had is the study that seeks to determine the study habits of the students of the University of the Philippines. In this example, the population will consist of all students of the University of the Philippines from the different branches of the University of the Philippines in the Philippines. And in most cases, it's impossible to include all the members of the population in a study, so we select a sample or a small part or portion of the population. But the sample has to be an accurate or excellent representative of the population. So we have sampling techniques for selecting a sample from the population. And some of the most common sampling techniques are the following: random sampling, systematic sampling, convenience sampling, cluster sampling, and stratified sampling. Number one is random sampling. Random sampling is the most preferred sampling technique by many researchers. because it has the quality of being able to eliminate some of the elements that may affect the validity of the study. In random sampling, the researcher selects the members of his sample by in no particular order. That is, there is no design planned or set and used by the researcher in the selection of the respondents. But it is this quality of randomness of the random sampling technique that most researchers consider this sampling technique as being unscientific. The second common sampling technique is the systematic sampling technique. The systematic sampling technique is easier than the random sampling technique because in systematic random technique, the researcher employs and follows certain rules in the selection of the members of his sample in order to create an order or to create a regularity in the selection of a sample. For instance, if you want to select your interviewees by taking every seventh person that goes through the entrance of a restaurant as the interviewee. And that is an example of systematic sampling. But the one disadvantage of systematic sampling is that it can result to skewed data. And this can happen in our example when every seventh person that goes through the entrance of the restaurant is a female, or every seventh person that goes through the entrance of the restaurant belongs to the same age group. But the third sampling technique is convenience sampling. And convenience sampling is the easiest sampling method to use, but it is also the least reliable among the sampling techniques. And as the word convenience implies, this method is convenient for both the participants of the study and the researcher. In this inconvenience sampling, the researcher selects those individuals who are closest and easiest to reach and are readily available to participate in the study. And another advantage of convenience sampling is that it is excellent to use when the researcher aims to gather initial primary data about the perception or impression of individuals about a new product or that was launched. And in this case, the criteria for inclusion of respondents or the random selection of respondents and the diversity of participants in the study may not be important or relevant, and so the researcher may use convenience sampling. The fourth most common sampling technique is the cluster sampling. In cluster sampling, the researcher does not collect data from individuals, but the researcher collects data from subgroups of a population. And an example would be the municipalities in a study that determine the effects of community quarantine in the Philippines. And cluster sampling can be classified as a single cluster sampling or a two-stage cluster sampling. In a single cluster sampling or one-stage cluster sampling, all the members that belong to a cluster get to participate in the study. While in the two-stage cluster sampling, a random individuals are chosen within a cluster. The one disadvantage of using cluster sampling is that the clusters may not be good or accurate representative of a population. But one advantage of cluster sampling is that the clusters are predefined and the groups are clearly defined. And the last common sampling technique is stratified sampling. Stratified sampling is like the cluster sampling, in that the stratified sampling uses subgroups of a population, but the members that belong to a group or subgroup or strata they share common characteristics. When the characteristics or attributes of the members of a group are readily identifiable, it is easy to use the stratified sampling technique. Again, the most common sampling techniques are random sampling, that has the quality of being able to eliminate some of the elements that may affect the validity of a study. But in the selection of the members of the sample, the researcher follows no specific rules. The sample is selected in no particular order, and it is this randomness, quality of randomness of the random sampling technique, that some researchers consider it as being unscientific. The next one is systematic sampling, which is easier than random sampling, because in this type of sampling technique, the researcher follows and employs a set of rules in order to create an order or regularity in the selection of a sample. And the third one is convenience sampling, which is the easiest method for sampling but the least reliable, but is an excellent method for studies that seek to determine the impressions of consumers about a new product that was launched in the market. And the cluster sampling collects data from subgroups of a population and can be classified as one-stage or single cluster sampling or two-stage cluster sampling. In the one-stage cluster sampling, all the members of a cluster are included in the study and they all get to participate in the study. But in a two-stage cluster sampling, only random individuals are chosen from within a cluster to participate in the study. The stratified sampling is similar to cluster sampling in that it uses subgroups of a population, but the members of the groups or subgroups or strata share the same characteristics. When these characteristics are readily identifiable, it is easier for the researcher to use the stratified sampling, and the stratified sampling reduces the risk of bias. The crucial difference between stratified and cluster sampling techniques is that in stratified sampling technique, the individuals are randomly selected from each group or strata, while in cluster sampling technique, only clusters of a population are included in the study. Now the results and the data, after they have been summarized, can be presented in two ways. The two ways of presentation of data, two ways of presenting data can be either in graphical form or tabular form. The graphical form of presenting and summarizing data uses graphs, and examples of graphs that are used in presentation of data are line graph, pictograph, horizontal bar graph, vertical bar graph, the pie chart or pie graph, the histogram, the frequency polygon, and the ogive or ogive. In presenting data in tabular form, the data are summarized and presented using tables. And example of table that we will study in this course is the frequency table, both for group data and ungrouped data. In the next lesson, we will start with descriptive statistics, and we will start with the measures of central tendency, also known as the measures of position or measures of location. And for that lesson, you will have to be prepared with your calculator. And if you have any question for today's lesson, please ask your question in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, Art Kalison. Thank you.